Hills, the family estate on the Hudson River. The grandchildren of John D. Rockefeller Sr., the world's first billionaire, inhabited a world of their own.
This is not just an estate. This is a place that's 10 times the size of Monaco. It's 5 times the size of Central Park. This is like a country in the midst of America. It's their mythic place and it's their native land.
In 1945, Junior had the portraits of his children painted to hang at the grand living room of the Playhouse at Pocantico. He was proud of his sons, who had served their country in World War II.
The war is a crucible in which the brothers really become men, and become men not only chronologically, but could become men inside the Rockefeller family. The war begins, really, the transition between Junior's control of the family and their control of the family.
At war's end, the brothers, eager to carve out a role for themselves, descended on Rockefeller Center. They settled in room 5600, the Rockefeller family offices, which would soon occupy 3 floors of the RCA building.
The brothers literally invaded room 5600. They were not going to come back and simply pick up where they had left off and do their father's bidding. They were going to try and change things as powerfully as they could. And in doing this, Nelson very much took the lead.
He probably had the most organizational energy of any of them. Like his grandfather Rockefeller, he was farsighted and was constantly trying to see into what could be done, how could we do things better. He probably had a lot of ideas that he put forth with considerable energy.
As early as the 1930s, Nelson had begun to muscle his way into the position of leadership reserved for his more retiring older brother, John. As president of Rockefeller Center, he had played a key role in its commercial success. And in 1939, he took his mother's place at the Museum of Modern Art. During the war, Nelson had proved himself outside the family. He served in Washington under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, setting wartime policy for Latin America. At the end of his tour, one observer noted, "Nelson Rockefeller is someone who can keep all the balls in the air without losing his own." Nelson now challenged Junior's control of the family office, replacing his father's associates with his own and his brothers.
Talk about the best and the brightest. These are the best and the brightest minds. And the question was, how are we going to use this power that hangs over this country like a vast charge of static electricity? How are we going to use this power, tap into it?
To reflect the new confidence, Nelson remodeled room 5600 in a daring, modern style. He led Junior on a tour of the new family offices, and with characteristic enthusiasm asked, "Gee, Pa, isn't this all impressive?" Junior softly replied, "Nelson, whom are we trying to impress?" All the brothers were now married and had begun their own families. Their children, known as the cousins, roamed Pocantico, unsettling Junior, delighting Abby, and discovering what it meant to be a Rockefeller.
My own personal experience of Pocantico as a child is of a place that on the one hand was something of an Eden, right? Apart from the rest of the world, was serene and beautiful, but also as something of a prison that cut us off from ordinary relationships with other people and from the larger world. I remember as a child being disturbed by the fact that the family properties were patrolled by dogs with armed guards. And I remember reading as a boy Charles Dickens' The Tale of Two Cities about the French Revolution. And this piqued my imagination that here we were, in a sense, living as a rather aristocratic family in exclusive surroundings. And I began to imagine that out there was an angry mob who deeply resented what we had.
Inside the walls of the family estate, the cousins were schooled in Junior's strict moral code.
My grandfather was very powerful in that way. He transmitted the values that he and his father had held down to his 6 children and down to all of us in the cousins generation.
From a very early age, we were given an allowance and told that 10% of that allowance had to be given away. So from the time we had anything to do with money, it wasn't only getting money or spending money, it was giving away money.
Yeah, I think it was really Sunday when we received allowances, generally strategically just before church, as I recall. So a portion of that allowance was certainly going to go out pretty soon thereafter, and then an accounting for it. But I know with some of my sisters it became kind of a game to see how skillfully you could invent the previous week's expenditures.
The ledgers which had regulated the lives of 3 generations of Rockefellers were all but abandoned by the time the cousins came of age. But lunch with grandfather at Kaiket was a ritual.
He used to receive us as a family on Sunday, and we would come, and that was a moment of some formality. I mean, you got all dressed up for it, and you came on time. And
grandfather would sit at the head of the table, and he would carve a roast. And he did it like a surgeon. How I often looked around the big table with about 20 people at it and wondered how he was going to be able to make that roast beef go that far, but he sliced very fine slices and served them around. And conversation flowed. And of course, grandmother always made things fun. She loved having her family around, and she loved any social occasion.
On April 3rd, 1948, after a long winter stay in Arizona, Abby welcomed her family to Kaiket.
My wife Peggy and our son David and I were with her alone for a good part of the weekend, and we had a wonderful time together. And strangely, as we went back to New York in the car after it, we both felt that it had a very special meaning for us, and we even wondered whether it might be the last time that it would happen.
Abby Aldrich Rockefeller died the following day, at age 73, of a weak heart. Junior, whose world revolved around Abby, could not bear the pain. "Take this blow away," he said, insisting that his wife be cremated immediately. "Take this blow away."
I knew he missed her terribly, and he and I had become very close. So I went up and I spent 2 weeks with him that first summer that she died. He talked about her, you know, when Mama and I did this, or Mama and I did that, or I'm doing this for her in her memory. He never more or less said, "I'm terribly sad," but you knew he was.
Though he would live out the rest of his life at Kaiket, Junior transferred Pocantico to his children 4 years after Abby's death.
The year 1952 marks the end of the transition from John D. Rockefeller Jr. to his sons. It's from that point on that the brothers' generation begins to have the recognition, visibility